I just want to have an idea.
Half an hour.
Oh, okay, all right, let's hear.
Okay. That does not include questions in between unless we extend it.
I was not counting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
All right.
you on your own.
Okay. All right. So then, Chairperson, just perhaps just to close on the previous presentation, I just asked the team here to just put that slide on. Can you put it on? Just for the visual impression of those slivers in context. That's what was the spend of TNA through the GCRS system. Everybody else is in that big pie and so on. So when we're having this discussion, you see, because Chairperson, part of the narrative out there is that whatever was paid on TNA was like irregular. Also, it's not such a thing. Everything, all processes were followed and all of that. There's nothing irregular there. So the impression created that if you spend 1 cent, you spend 1 cent too much. That approach is really misguided. So we need to just be clear that all of this is money that was, there was value derived for that money. But at the same time, when people pretend as if TNA captured GCRS, it's actually not true. These are the only slivers that they got there. This is information from GCRS. So that's that one, then, Chairperson, I wanted to just flag.
Is that in the bundle?
That's the one that is on the statement, Chairperson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted it here because I see here that the photocopier is black and white. They don't have color printers here.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Are we done then with that slide?
Yeah, that slide is done, Chairperson. You can remove it.
Okay.
Okay. Then, Chairperson, as I close on IFMS, I would have thought, I was really disappointed, Chair must say this, by the attitude of National Treasury when I was asking for information. And I say to them that I'm not coming here last minute because I'm disorganized, so to speak. I'm coming to them last minute because I only knew last week that there will be further questions that I need to ask. And therefore I need more information. So I try to appeal to them to say, this is in the interest of achieving the objectives. Can you please give me this, this report, which I want to use as an example? And they threw the, all the red tape they can throw at me, Chairperson, to say, I spoke to the spokesperson there, Jablans Kakan. He was saying to me, no, you must remember that you must go through the process, and it's a 30-day process that you must go through in all this before we release this information. And by the way, Chairperson, having had the GCRS experience, because I had the same kind of attitude when you're asking for information, even 30 days later, it's no guarantee that they'll give you. They'll come up with some clause that gives them a right not to give this thing to you. And then you have to appeal to the minister like I did at GCRS. But this time around, I could not appeal to the minister because they have not refused. They've simply said, we're still with our processes, we can't just give and all that. So, Chairperson, I had to rely on the rules of the Commission, Rule 6.1, which allows any evidence, so to speak. So I used that Rule 0.1 to bring the report because I don't want the Commission to be frustrated. The report is right here, Chairperson, and this is from the whistleblower. This is exact as it is. So we'll see 30 days later what happens, but the report is here so that the work of the Commission is not frustrated by red tape. I really would have thought that given the enthusiasm that National Treasury was on this place talking about this thing, that they would say, okay, quickly here. But they didn't want to give it to me. But that's the situation.
So the report that you are showing me, is it the report from which
the findings come
you got that, what page was 230, 231?
Yeah, that's where the findings were.
The funding, where the funding, yes. Not the funding, the revenues for different media.
No. This report, Chairperson, is the one
for that project from Treasury.
Project from Treasury.
That's the report that was
tabled at Scopa.
Served before Scopa?
This right, Chairperson.
Okay.
This is this report. This is where the 1.7 billion. Yes. There's nothing to show for it. This is the
Yes.
detail right here.
But
So I
you-
will leave this
you are-
copy here.
Or you are making that available?
Yeah, I'm making, somebody can take it here. There it is, right here.
Okay, but you are not talking to it, you are just
No.
making it available?
No.
Okay, I think,
Leaving it here.
I think the legal team will take it, and then in due course, they will indicate what is to be made of it.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Then, Chairperson, a very important point, because we're talking about the capture here, and I'm going to wrap up, Chairperson. It is my contention, Chairperson, that actually there has never been a time when the state had not been captured. There has never been a time. Not only has the state been captured, Chairperson, even the laws have been captured. And I'm going to make a very quick example. Even the laws have been captured. We have a very powerful and an enabling clause in the Constitution of this country, Chairperson, Section 217, that talks to the procurement. That section, Chairperson, has got 3 subsections. And the one section talks to efficiencies, you know, everything about, which is what everybody keeps quoting. But there are other 2 sections that nobody bothers about. And the other 2 subsections, for instance, subsection 2 says, let me perhaps just to revise memories. It's a very quick one, Chairperson. Procurement 217. Subsection 1 says, when an organ of state in the national, provincial, or local sphere of government or any other institution identified in national legislation contracts for goods and services, it must do so in accordance with a system which is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Everybody stops there. Even PFMA stops here. But the Constitution says, subsection 1, which I've just read, does not prevent the organs of state or institutions referred to in that subsection from implementing a procurement policy providing for A, category of preference in the allocation of contracts, B, the protection or advancements of person or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. Then subsection 3 says, national legislation must prescribe a framework within which the policy referred to in subsection 2 must be implemented. Now, you would then think, then, Chairperson, that here is a directive from the Constitution to say there must be a national legislation to effect subsection 2. But the national legislation which we have in the form of Triple PFA Procurement Policy Framework Act number 5 of 2000 makes reference to what the Constitution says. But what it does is something else. So what this act does, Chairperson, and the reason I'm saying this is because in this forensic investigation, when Treasury was to brief out for this job, it then said it must go on a 90-10 principle. So what that means is that when they allocate the points, they must allocate the points, 90% of the points must go to the lower price, 10% must be for historically disadvantaged considerations, whether it's BEE or whatever. So what that effectively means, Chairperson, this is the most elegant way to exclude black business in things, because in terms of economies of scale, black business is not about to be able to compete toe-to-toe with the established white corporates in this country. So when you say 90-10, you are using a legislative curtain to shield your actual message. The actual message here is that you're looking for the established big corporates, as it were. You don't want anybody else. Now, this is a challenge. I mean, last time there was an interaction here between the chairperson and somebody, I think it was Mr. Gordon or somebody, about the issues of pricing. Now, Chairperson, it's impossible for black business to quote on exact same price with an established company for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's important for all of us in this country to understand the apartheid spatial development, that because of that, most black businesses that are in the townships or everywhere, if they have to compete for the same opportunity for somebody in town, those people have got transport costs that they must put into the product. They've got all kinds of things. Because you stay in the township, you are deemed to be in a high-risk area. So when you go borrow money, you borrow it at prime plus 3, when others here that live in town, they borrow it at prime minus 2. So therefore, at the end of the day, including economies of scale, an established corporate will always beat you with price. Now, if you have a government policy that says, I'm only interested in the lowest price, it's an elegant way of saying, black business, don't bother participating in this. So that's how captured the laws are of this country. I then move on, Chairperson, to that forensic. That forensic has been done, and we await the report. And in my statement...
I'm sorry, let's go back to what you were talking about just now.
Okay.
Of course, you may be right that if the work is to be done in town and you are based in the township and you have to compete with other competitors who are based in town, you might have a certain disadvantage in terms of costs and so on, because of you have to travel and so on and other factors. But and that may well exclude certain black people. But of course, to the extent that there may be black businesses, if we can call them that for convenience, in town, then that disadvantage in terms of costs, transport costs, for example, would not be there. There may be others, but at least that would not be there. Would that be right?
Well, except that, Chairperson, those black businesses in town are faced with high rental costs because they don't own property, they have to lease that property, and they compete with people that own the fixed buildings. So that's a problem. So you find that your cost items as black business in town are far higher than your next door neighbor.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's why I was saying there may be other disadvantage,
okay, yes,
but at least the one for traveling wouldn't be there if we are talking about black business that is based in town.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, okay. Chairperson. I was just using a quick example.
Okay.
But it goes deeper, this thing, Chairperson, because there's a whole lot of things. Because what you then do as well, now that Chairperson seems to be interested in this, there's also other things like things that affect your liquidity. As black business, your suppliers expect you to pay cash here and now. The established businesses, they don't have to do this. They can pay 60 days later and all that. Those are all the arrangements that enable them to do things in a much more competitive way. Now,
no, there is obviously just no doubt that if you're doing business as a black person, mostly you will not be on the same level in terms of economically with your white counterpart, at least most of the time.
Yeah. Yes, and the Constitution recognized that, and the Constitution said, please put together a legislation that is going to cover that, so that people are protected, people are preferred. But then the legislation that we have seeks to treat unequal people equally. This is what it seeks to do, Chairperson. And you appear like you are asking for favors when you're trying to say, but this is not fair. The playing field is not the same. The playing field is not level yet. So we can't have a situation where we are approached as if since 1994 we just switched on the light, everything is equal. No, the landscape is still very much skewed. So we need to have an understanding of that. So, Chairperson, without dealing with any specific issue, the general principle that the products from black business, for them to be a bit more, to have a bit of a premium, it's something that must be expected, and it's something that a state which purports to be a developmental state needs to take that as a given, that will have that issue. Otherwise, it really means that black people must not be in business.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. Then I move on, then, Chairperson, to then just in line, just in keeping with my statement. This is the last page, Chairperson, of my statement. Just to say, then another company was appointed, and it was meant to have submitted the report. And on that day, I don't know what happened, but bottom line.
Are you still within Treasury?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just rounding off, Chairperson. Bottom line is that as things stand right now, I saw a tweet, the Chairperson of SCOPA is very active on Twitter, so he keeps live updates. Although the first expectation was that on the 20th of November, there would be that report, but things happened between that company and National Treasury, so the report did not happen. But on the 22nd of November, I think last week Thursday, then that report was given raw as it is. I'm sure National Treasury will still comment on it, but that report is there. I think it will be interesting to see what those auditors, what that forensic audit has unearthed there on that. So that wraps up that one then, Chairperson, just as an example of the kinds of things that made TNA and NN7 unpopular, because these are the things that cut both ways. It really means that National Treasury must think that we are attacking them, as it were, when in fact we want to do what Mr. Pravin Gordhan said, that we must root out the cancer wherever it's there. So root out all the cancer. So that's really what we thought we were doing there, Chairperson. So move on, Chairperson. This is another critical story about the white-collar capture of the state. This is classic, what I'm going to describe to Chairperson now. This is classic stuff that to try and find illegality and unlawfulness in this thing, you struggle. It's elegantly done. It starts off somewhere, and this is what we reported on. It starts off somewhere in November 2006 with a very innocent memo, which I put here as Exhibit 9 on pages 261 to 271. So this memo from SARS, Chairperson, it's a very interesting memo. This memo seeks to sanitize the appointment of a particular service provider at SARS in 2006. So in a nutshell, what happens here is that this company gets brought in not through open tender process, and some argument gets made about emergency and all that, and therefore regulation 16A6.4 gets invoked, which talks to it's not practical to go on an open tender. So this company gets appointed, and part of the reason used is that it's cheap. When others were quoting 300 and something million or 400 million, this particular company was saying they can do this thing for 100 million. So then it sort of like makes sense. Okay, 100 million, and we need this thing here and now and all of this. Let's get on and get this company on board. So, and the person that makes a recommendation, part of the officials of SARS that makes the recommendation, instead of having a bid evaluation or a bid adjudication committee, even for the handful that were selected, the person says, in my opinion, I think we should invite this one, this one, this one. So the opinion counted instead of a proper committee that's supposed to do this. So one man decides that, in my opinion, we must only look at this one, this one, this one. So, and the first one said, I'm not interested. The other one said about 400 million or something. And this one said 100 million, said, okay, this is our horse, we take this one. Now, the point here, Chairperson, is that what has since happened since the installation of this company. And I'm deliberately leaving names out because I'm here to deal with the principle, not to lambast people. I'm here to deal with the principle, but all the details are here, Chairperson. If the commission wants names mentioned, I'll take direction from the commission, but I'm leaving them deliberately. The names are here. This company starts off at 100 million. And then what then happens since then to date, this company has been getting its participation renewed internally, no processes involved. By 2016 already, this company was raking in R1 billion. This is the one that started sadly at 1 million. And all processes to make it in terms of the constitution, in terms of PFMA, cost effectiveness, openness and transparency and all that, none of that. Internally, this thing would get renewed. So what you have now, I think now, if you look at the IT bill of SARS, I'm told it's sitting at something like 8 billion. But this company is probably 1.5 or something of that. I haven't got that number, the fresh number as it is, but it's in that astronomical figure as things stand right now. So what does this mean, Chairperson? Now what you have, this company plays a very important role in that it's involved in e-filing and all that. So now, if you are to say this company must go on an open bid now and stop everything, maybe somebody else, a very solid argument is going to be made about how this is going to disrupt the collection of taxes. And therefore, you have a company that is there that came in through ways that are not so transparent, but now this company, we can't actually dislodge it as things stand. It's almost a real risk now to dislodge this company. And that's what I call white-collar corporate capture of the state, because you then begin to understand, Chairperson, why even PFMA, it incentivizes service providers that have got sort of government experience. So what you find with PFMA is that if you are a new player, PFMA is not friendly to you. PFMA is friendly to somebody who's got a foot in the door. So even if I was to have a state-of-the-art IT company today, but my chances of bidding against this particular company at SARS are zero, because this company is going to argue that they've already got the territory, everything is smooth. To take them out will cause so much disruption, someone's going to work out how much confidence will be lost in the system, systemic risk, and all of those things will be argued. So you now have a company that is going to be entrenched like that, the Chairperson. So that is the situation that you find, the Chairperson. So these are the things that TNA and NN7 report on, and obviously you can see it cuts both ways. Private sector does not like this, that we keep exposing some shenanigans that they do in collaboration with some of these state departments, as it were. So that is the Chairperson. I mean, even as we speak now, I'm told that this company is now being used to provide services on other departments. So what we have now, we have SARS as almost an agent. So other companies don't have to go bidding. They ask SARS that we know they've got a good IT system. So SARS has now become some kind of a broker. They now service other departments, and the other departments pay into SARS. SARS pays into this company. That is the network that is in place. So that, for me, Chairperson, is the blueprint of white-collar corporate capture of the state that we really need to be dealing with. And by the way, Chairperson, some of us, when we make these points, people think we're deflecting from Guptas. No. If Guptas, must put this very clear, Chairperson, if Guptas are found to have done anything untoward, anything that is wrong, the full wrath of the law must be, they must suffer the full wrath of the law. But the law must not have eyes. The law must be blind. The law must apply to all malfeasance wherever it raises ugly head. We can't have you can't turn a blind eye on some of these things. And also, Chairperson, the reason I'm raising these, I'm not digging up stuff of pre-1994. This is current stuff as we're sitting now. That IFMS, Chairperson, is going to go this route. Once that system is embedded in the state, no other service provider will be able to ever walk in there. Those that are there through the IFMS have embedded themselves for lifetime. That's what it's going to be. So that is the white-collar corporate capture that I'm talking about. So that concludes my issues around why Tiene was
liquidated.
Yes, the chairperson was hated by everybody. So the rest of the liquidation thing is well covered in the affidavit. Mr. Maleka will ask whatever he wants to ask. I'm not going to go through that. But then I've got two other issues quickly, Chairperson, which were also emanating from the questions.
Yeah.
The one thing, Chairperson, is the issue around the Standard Bank affidavit, which has been put here as to, that talks to what was I doing basically at the IMC.
At the meeting between one or other bank
Yes.
or banks at a meeting that seems to have been chaired by
Yes.
Minister Zwane.
Yes, that's one.
Yes, yeah.
So, Chairperson, I have put an affidavit to this matter. And in the affidavit, I point out that I actually attended the meeting at the directive stroke request of the minister. I was the advisor to the minister when this was happening, part-time advisor at that. I was an advisor to the minister. So I went there as an advisor. So the question is, I must relate what transpired in that meeting. I think that the request, Chairperson, borders on being unlawful in this way. You see, Chairperson, there are two groups of people in a meeting. There's meeting participants, there's people that are in attendance. If I go to a board meeting, in the board meeting, you could have the board members, if let's say the quorum of the board meeting is 5 people, and you've invited all other departmental people, there can be 20 in that meeting. If the quorum is 5 board members and you've got 2 board members, notwithstanding that you've got 20 attendees, that meeting is not correct, that meeting will not happen. So to then ask an attendee of a meeting to relate what happened in the meeting is just not making sense. Because also what you say carries nothing, carries no weight, because first and foremost, I'm not a spokesperson of the IMC, so I have no mandate to be dealing with that. If the commission is interested what really happened there, the commission had a chairperson who is known, and the chairperson was reporting to cabinet. In fact, what I have done, the chairperson, in support, just to show this, on Exhibit 11, page 273 to 274, I've brought here a cabinet statement. I've only got 2 pages. I've highlighted 4.7 of these 2 pages. In that, it says on 4.7 of those 2 pages, on 273 to 274, it says, Cabinet received a report from the Ministers of Mineral Resources, Labor and Finance following their constructive engagement with stakeholders in the banking industry. The outcome of this report will be communicated in due course. The only reason I'm raising this, Chairperson, is that it shows that there was a process that was flowing, and if anybody is really interested, the other people that can be approached is cabinet. Chairperson, I used to sit I used to attend cabinet meetings. But the fact that I attend cabinet meetings, that does not give me a right to then explain to people what happened in cabinet.
Well, no, not really, Mr. Manyi. If you were present in an office or at a room where something was said or was done whether you were there officially or unofficially, whether you had a right to be there or not have a right to be there, as long as you witnessed something, you saw something, or you heard something being said, you can be asked to say, what did you see? What did you hear? What happened while you were present? Okay. So the question of whether you are authorized or not might be another question, but simply from the point of view of saying you were present, you saw something, or you must have seen something, you must have heard something, tell us what you heard, tell us what you saw, that's legitimate.
Okay. I'm only...
So I'm just mentioning that point.
Okay.
It may be that based on what you are saying, maybe I can leave it to Mr. Malega to deal with it if he wants to ask you questions about it. But I thought I must just clarify that part, yeah.
Okay. No, Chairperson, I think because it also happened, I don't know, a while ago, all I can remember was a decorum of the meeting. The meeting had a very good decorum. There was no screaming at anybody. And the meeting was a proper meeting, exchange of views and whatever, discussion happened. The details are contained in the minutes of the meeting, which the Secretariat can provide, I think, if asked.
Okay, no, thank you. You are done, yeah. Thank you, Ms. Malega.
And then the last point, Chairperson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then the last point, part of the documents I was given, what is commonly referred to as the Gupta leaks and so on. Now, Chairperson, I just needed to understand something on this thing. I must first be clarified on this. Except for the one email that is there, except for the one email in January 2011, where there was an invite. But that invite, in the list of the things that was given, there's a spreadsheet of people that were invited. This was an invite to the India versus South Africa, or India and South Africa friendship of 150 years that was happening at KZN. But in that spreadsheet, I was invited in my capacity as BMF, not as president of the BMF, not as government, and so on. The rest of the other emails that are there are emails when I was not in the public service. No, I was not in GCRs and so on. I was not in government. Now, I'm perplexed, Chairperson, as to what is actually going on here. Here am I, a business person, a private sector person, sending emails or receiving emails or whatever with another private sector person. No government involvement is mentioned there. Absolutely nothing. It's just if I were to characterize them briefly, Chairperson, it would be an email talking about room allocation. I don't even know the people that were dealing with those rooms. Some operational matter about, no, just arrange rooms for them. But if I look at the timing and everything, it was during the wedding. I've always been on public, Chairperson, to say I attended the Gupta wedding. I've never hidden that point. I saw nothing wrong then, I see nothing wrong today, and so on. If they were to invite me tomorrow to another wedding, I will still go, and so on. So for me, it's no issue attending a wedding. And then if it's not a wedding, then it would be maybe a CV that can be linked to have come from me and so on. But even that, Chairperson, I don't understand. We do this all the time in the private space to send CVs of people around, helping people look for jobs and so on. I have not understood why is this, what is the context of this, but this is what Mr. Maleka is going to explain. And as I closed, I know Chair wants to say something, but as I close, Chair, I also wanted, because the impression that I have is that this commission is supposed to be impartial, fair, and make sure that everybody is treated equally. Now, one of the things I just found very strange is that in these leaks, Chairperson, one thing that is not shown is what I have. Like, for instance, this picture here, it's in the exhibit.
Is it in the bundle here? Is it in the bundle here?
I think it must be in the bundle, the Chairperson. Did you find it there? Yeah, it's in the bundle, the Chairperson. This
Okay.
picture, it might,
What
maybe
page
somebody,
is it?
can I just ask the registrar to take it to the chair there?
Or
last-
maybe if they tell me the page, I think
Chair, we've put it in a bundle as page 275.
or it will still be put in the bundle, or it is?
No, it's already in the bundle.
Oh, okay, 275.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, this picture, Chairperson, as you're going through it, has got Advocate Thulima Donzela with the Guptas. Now,
Yes.
this picture is not featured in the emails that are featured. Maybe I'm trying to understand the fairness of this process here, Chairperson, that here am I, a former government person, and I'm being followed about where I send emails and I don't send emails. Advocate Thulima Donzela would have been sent an email to invite her to this thing, but I'm not understanding that she's yet to explain as to why did you get an email from the Guptas, but everybody else must answer this, Chairperson. Where is the leveling of the playing field from this commission?
Thank you, Mr. Manyi. I understand you are done, and Mr. Malega is now free to ask questions. He has heard you, what you have said.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Manyi, before I get to the details of your evidence in the written statements, many as they are that you have now submitted to the Commission, and also your oral expansion of that evidence from this morning, can I ask you this? As you sit here today in the witness box, do you accept that members of the Gupta family and the businesses that they own have been seriously implicated by way of credible evidence led before the chairperson up to this point in serious malfeasance of state capture?
Well, Chairperson, my approach in the issues affecting anyone in this country is that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. South Africa is a rule of law country. I mean, I was astounded when Ms. Barbara Hogan said to me I was at ESCOM when I was not at ESCOM, as an example, Chairperson.
Well, Mr. Manyi, it will be helpful if you start by just answering the question. For example, he's asking, Mr. Malega is asking whether, as you sit there, whether you accept that in evidence led before this commission, the Gupta family has been seriously implicated in corruption. So one answer might be, no, I do not accept that. Another answer might be, yes, I accept that. But maybe you might want to contextualize your acceptance or your rejection of that proposition. So I'm just mentioning that because if you start, when you answer in that way, it will make it easy to make progress. You are not prevented from contextualizing where it's necessary, but it helps if the first response goes to the question.
Well, my answer is I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And Chairperson, let me just finish then, Chairperson.
Yes.
You see, I was very hopeful, Chairperson, when the Estina project was brought before the courts in Bloemfontein. I was really hoping. I thought that was an open-close case and so on. But when the state lost its case there, I was not sure anymore as to what's going on here. And that was a civil case.
Yes. Okay.
So, yeah. So therefore, Chairperson, I don't know where this is going to end up. Because when the state went there, it went there, I think, with a lot more confidence than what I've seen here. People that I have seen here, I think, Chairperson, I must, even if I've got to say so myself, I must take the cap in terms of producing documentary evidence of things that I am talking about. And people that have been here have been very poetic, Chairperson, without producing evidence. And so I just don't know if we can just implicate people purely based on poetry. People came here and they spoke. I was really hoping that they're going to do something similar to what I'm doing. It might not be the best, but I've tried, Chairperson, to listen to your counsel when you say people must bring evidence to corroborate. I tried to do that.
Yes.
I didn't find it here, Chairperson, so I'm struggling to convict people based on poetry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just bear in mind that Mr. Malega didn't ask you whether you accept that they are guilty or not. He simply asked you whether you accept that they are seriously implicated.
I think, Chairperson, it's important that maybe some of us that are not in the legal profession, these things get explained.
Yes.
In that there are two things for me. You can either be mentioned or implicated. For me, I draw a line. You can be mentioned. They've been mentioned here, but to be implicated for me is a step higher than being mentioned. So to be implicated, there must be corroborating evidence to say indeed to do this. So for me, that is implication. So is this what I'm saying? I struggled to find evidence to corroborate the oral evidence that people were giving here.
Thank you. Mr. Malega?
Mr. Manye, don't uncontextualize my question. I have not asked you about proceedings involving the Gupta family relating to Tiene in other courts. I have asked you questions about evidence in this commission. You have been following the proceedings of this commission since it began, correct?
No, in and out. I've been listening and not listening, because sometimes I would come and listen here and be very frustrated that my whole morning is gone and I'm not seeing any evidence. People are just talking and talking and talking. So maybe out of that frustration, maybe when I left, they produced something. But most of the times that I was here, I was just seeing people giving us theoretical perspectives on matters and all that. So I do not have, I mean, as I sit here now, I'm speaking under oath. I sit here and now, I can't point to any piece of evidence that anybody here put on this table. But I know a lot of lyrics that they've waxed on everything. But
you accept that the proceedings of this commission are televised live and they are reported on credibly in news media, both print and television, almost daily. Do you accept that that happens?
Two things. Yes, I accept that happens, but I also think the commission must not take it for granted that we are glued on TV and reading newspapers. For instance, I don't buy newspapers just on principle, because of the amount of distortions that they have to correct people all the time. This morning on Twitter, for instance, being here, I make a clear statement of reading from the internal audit report that whatever point I was making. And then we have a journalist here twisting that and saying that was a SCOPA observation or something, and yet I was very clear that these were the findings of the internal audit report. So I have lost confidence in the newspapers. I don't read newspapers.
Yes, but you watch the proceedings of this TV, of the proceedings of this commission on TV. That is why you were able to see what Ms. Williams said about you in your absence from this commission, but on TV, correct?
I think it's important to contextualize that. I was written a letter. I was told that on the 31st of August, she is going to be here. So I had a vested interest in that particular case, yes. But I don't get letters from the commission every day to listen to everybody.
Mr. Manye, you know, do you not, that Mr. Maseko came to tell the chairperson about the extent of unlawful instructions imposed upon him by a member of the Gupta family, You know that.
Yes.
Mr. Maseko came here and testified almost for the whole day about that evidence. Do you have reason to doubt what he told the chairperson?
Do I have reason to doubt?
What Mr. Maseko told the chairperson about the true nature of the instruction given to him or imposed upon him by a member of the Gupta family?
Yes, I have reason to doubt.
Do you have reason to doubt what then Deputy Minister Jonas told the chairperson about the offer that was made to him by a member of the Gupta family?
Let me start with the first one. I'll come to that one.
Please answer the second question because you've answered the first. You can explain the second question later on.
Yes, I have reason to doubt.
Minister Tiene, then Minister of Finance, came here to tell the chairperson a number of things, including the way he was dismissed. Do you have reason to doubt what he told the chairperson in that regard?
I didn't listen to Minister Nene's one. But I listened to these two.
You did not listen to the evidence of Minister Nene?
No.
Did you follow the evidence of Minister Godan?
That's where I struggled, actually. I came very excited. I had booked off the whole day to listen to Minister Godan because I thought, because he was a Minister of Finance, he's going to have tangible information, paper trail, and all that. I struggled. I sat here and I listened and I lost concentration, to be honest.
But you heard what he said to the chairperson, even though you may have lost concentration.
I think by definition it means if you've lost concentration, you can't hear as effective.
Do you have reason?
Mr. Malega, I'm sorry. Well, for what it's worth, Mr. Mani, let me mention that if I recall correctly, Mr. Godan, like I think a number of people who were at National Treasury at some stage have indicated, and I think he also indicated that he has other matters in regard to which he wanted to give evidence, but he was advised by the Commission's legal team that that would need to come later because at this stage the Commission is dealing with certain specific terms of reference. So I just want to mention that he might not be done in terms of things that he wants to cover.
Right. Okay, Chairperson, thank you for that. I will listen when he does that.
Thank you.
Mr. Manye, you heard the evidence of Mr. Fuzili.
Yeah, partly.
You heard that part of his evidence when he told the chairperson about what Mr. Gondongwana said to him.
About Mr.?
Gondongwana.
Or about the phone call or something?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard that part.
You heard that evidence?
Yes.
Yes. Do you have any reason to doubt what he said to the chairperson as you sit here today?
Well, yes, I do.
Well, just explain to me why.
Because I would have thought, you see, I could start from the beginning, the three people that I say have reason to doubt, so that is clear. For instance, let's start with Mr. Maseko. He said, the president said, now, in other words, and the chairperson was very clear to explain that statement bullet by bullet, what it means, that help these Gupta brothers, so to speak. Now, I was a DG myself, so ministers, because they are public reps, they are the face of the department, they are the chief face of the department. So people interface with ministers, people interface with the president, because these are the people that go in the ballot box. So people go to them naturally to say, I need this, I need that. And the presidents and the ministers do not have the apparatus. The only thing they can point to is to the DG. And the DG must then point the people to processes that must be followed and all that. I mean, if Mr. Maseko had said that president said to him, I don't care about what processes that must be followed and all that. I didn't hear him saying this. He just said help. So that would have been said to me by a number of people, ministers, to say, help these people. And we call the people in, you explain to them how the process works, that is helping the people. So that was my understanding. But the characterization of that request was a characterization that could lead to only one conclusion only, that the president was sort of getting him to do something that was unlawful. So that's why I have doubts about the rest of everything else. So Mr. Jonas, for instance, he makes the claims that he makes, and the next thing, he's not even clear who actually did this. At the one point, he says it's Mr. A.J. Gupta, then he's not clear, then somebody else. Then I'm not sure what is this thing, and so on. And by the way, part of the disturbing thing, Chairperson, which is in the public domain, is that they were in some hotel, and then they drove to Tuzan. I'm saying to myself, why does a deputy minister leave his bodyguards and everybody and drive with this young chap on a car to some place that he said is not even familiar with this place? So all those kinds of things, they just leave you wonder as to what exactly was at play here. So things like that, Chairperson, for me, they just are things that I just don't understand. So I can't vouch for people that have got those kinds of what I think are gaps in their depositions.
Yes. Mr. Manyi, you indicated earlier on that TNA lost its government business because it was punished for revealing what you call white-collar corporate capture of the state. Did I understand your evidence to be correct when I characterize it that way?
It was punished for that.
Yes. When, in your view, did this punishment begin?
This punishment started, I think, around 2017. In fact, as I come into TNA, you will see that it's in my affidavit that I came into a loss-making organization. It was already bleeding. This thing was bleeding something like 5 million rand per month, roughly. And I thought I was going to stem the tide. And my biggest preoccupation with this chairperson was, the big thing for me was to save jobs. That stable had employed 500 people. And I thought, if I replace the Guptas there, I can save those 500 jobs. But it was not to be. As we sit here and now, 500 people are without a job on something, in my view, that could have been prevented. So it is a very sad state of affairs. If somebody had a problem with a Manyi or the Guptas, that should have been dealt with, but the business should not have been undermined, which was providing an alternative view in the media space, which was providing employment to a whole lot of young people, mainly black. So I really think that was a tragedy, Chairperson, to have lost that business.
I thought that you told the chairperson that the reporting slant of TNA from the beginning was not to behave like an enemy of the state, but also to slant reporting in a manner that reflects positive elements of state activity. And that's why you liked it, correct?
Yeah. Yes. So Chairperson, I'm happy you raised this because this thing about dates. Excuse me. When we did the IFMS report, this happened around May, June 2017, as it were. This is when the height of hatred began, actually around that time, around May 2017, because the system works in collaboration, Chairperson. You then have a situation where the whole business model, which Mr. Maleka wanted to, is alluding to in his questions as to what is a business model. The business model was both private and government. So the private sector people, they are they hunt like a pack, Chairperson. You mess up with one, you've messed up with all of them. So when they saw how we report on this, but because they know some of them are doing these things elsewhere, so they say, no, these people are not good because they are the people that are exposing our secrets. So let's shut them down and so on. So that started to, and in fact, they create, then what then happens, Chairperson, they create such a frenzy around the new age, such a stigma, because then it's a whole cabal of 4 big media companies that inform the narrative out there. So they paint this narrative, they stigmatize Tiene such that even ministers get harassed in parliament. How much money to spend with Tiene? Now ministers were members of parliament, even at the provincial level, were beginning to be uncomfortable now because of this, because you've got the DA on that side that is also anti some of the transformation messages that this media house represents. So therefore, because they have created this monster called the Guptas, they've created this monster, so they want to know who is dealing with this monster. Now, if this was such a monster, Chairperson, the question is, why is it that National Treasury still had it in its systems? Because really, if this was such a rogue activity by this public, this house, it should not have even qualified to have been on the Treasury system and all that, because it's something that is doing things that are wrong. But because at a factual level, there was no substance to all this, this was all just a media hype designed to kill an alternative view, designed to entrench a mainstream narrative. This is what they did.
Chairperson, can I place on record that my questions are fairly straightforward? They elicit a yes or no answer, and they do not require this long-winded explanation, which I did not call for.
Try the best that you can, Mr. Manyi, to answer the questions directly. But when I say that, I'm not saying necessarily that you can't contextualize, but just try your best.
Chairperson, I think it's an unfair request this way. Let me give an example. It's an unfair request because, let me give an example. One of the questions given here is, were you interviewed? Now, if the answer is yes or no, then I'm going to say, no, I was not interviewed. Then media goes out there with the headline, Manyi got the job without an interview, when in fact the truth of the matter is that the interview issue does not arise because I was transferred. So a yes and no answer can be very misleading.
No, I understand what you are saying, Mr. Manyi. I understand what you are saying. But if we were to answer on the basis of all the erroneous things that the media is going to do, we would be here for a very long time. So what I'm saying is, I acknowledge that there may be questions where legitimately you might wish to say more than yes or no. That's accepted. But there may be there may be others where maybe the explanation might be too long. So let's take it each on its merits. So it's a general thing.
Okay.
I'm not saying say yes or no all the time. Just exercise your judgment, and let's see how it goes.
Yes, but at the same time, Chair, there are loaded questions. I think let's just be alive to that. Sometimes
you must feel free. Yeah. If you wish to say something, you can indicate to me if you want to add more.
Okay.
The idea is not to have a situation where your evidence is not fairly portrayed, or fairly given, but is to strike a balance between taking too long and giving an answer that you are not happy with because it's too short.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Maleka.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just explore two last questions on Mr. Manyi's liking for the New Age media newspaper and his dislike for the so-called mainstream media, with your permission. See, Mr. Manye, you have now told the chairperson that the reason you regarded the mainstream media as a cabal included the very fact that they were critical of the state in their reporting, correct?
You disappeared there. They were what in their reporting?
They were critical in their report about state activity. And that's the reason why you did not like the slant of being almost always critical against government.
Is that in terms of the mainstream?
Yes.
Well, no. That was just 10% of the issue. The rest of the issue with the mainstream media is that most of the time they get things wrong. They get things wrong most of the time. So one cannot place reliance, Chairperson, on what you see in the media. It's wrong all the time. Most of the time it's wrong.
For that part of 10% you're talking about, they were critical of the state, correct?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I'm just repeating what you told the chairperson.
You're saying critical mistakes.
For that 10% of the reasons why you did not like the cabal,
yes,
it is because they were critical of the state in their reporting.
Okay, yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand that. Mr. Malaga, is your question to Mr. Manye this, that one of the reasons or the reason why he didn't like mainstream media is because mainstream media is critical of the state?
In the way they reported on
In
the
the way
state
they
activities.
reported on
Yes.
state matters?
Yes.
Okay, and the answer, Mr. Manye?
The answer, Chairperson, is not no. The issue was not the issue was not because they were critical of the state. The issue was not they were not getting their facts right. The state is always open to criticism, but the issue is that when they criticize using wrong information. That is the problem. That's what we don't like about it.
Okay. In other words, what you are saying is they were not doing their homework properly.
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you.
You see, Mr. Manye, a media criticism of the state and what state actors are doing, it's nothing new. When Tiene was criticizing the state, on your version, it was revealing problems about national treasury, about this, what you call wastage of 1.7 billion rand. That was nothing new. The media has always done that.
But aren't you, Mr. Manye, Mr. Malaga, proceeding from the point that is the criticism that you say he had a problem with, whereas he has made it clear that his problem with the mainstream media wasn't the criticism, but it was them getting their facts wrong.
Yeah.
I understood him to say that there are many reasons. One of them relates to what he calls 10% of the critical reporting by the mainstream media of state activity.
Maybe you can clarify, Mr. Manye.
Yeah, no, here's the issue, Chairperson. The IFMS one is an example. The story was broken by our group. It was broken by Tiene and 7. And the length, and not only did the story get broken on hearsay and whatever, it was broken and broadcasted on using tangible information from this same audit report I just dropped off here. And what would happen in the media space, Chairperson, when they do their thing, whatever they do, there's some kind of collaboration of sorts, then you would just find that all the newspapers are pretty much saying the same thing and what have you. So we're not part of that part. So what that does is that it then diminishes the impact of what you're trying to say, because they don't want to report what we've reported, or not that we need it to be done that way. But then what they then do, when they do their own reporting, then they just find ways sometimes to, if they like a particular department, then they will find ways to find the positive spin of things. So with us, what we were doing, or what the New Age and the NN7 was doing, was to try and report things very sharply, whether it's right or wrong. When it's right, we really heap praises on it. When it's wrong, we do what we do. And we don't try to be the spokesperson of various departments.
Chair, may I help? May I clarify the question by being factual?
Okay.
I think it might help all of us. Mr. Manye, can you go to Exhibit M1?
Yeah.
Are you at Exhibit M1?
Yeah, I've got.
Can you please go to page 231?
Yeah.
You have explained to the chairperson that page 231 reflects the total art spend by Gcrs to all the media competitors, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you have indicated that the total art spend for that year, 2011 to 2012, was 192 odd million rand, correct?
No, not that correct. 194, I indicated.
194.
Yeah.
All right, let's work with that figure. And you have indicated that on that figure, Tiene for that year, and that year alone.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malega. I think I just need to say something to Mr. Manye relating to what he was discussing earlier on, for what it is worth.
Yes.
Mr. Manye, you were mentioning, at least in part, that the mainstream media was getting certain facts, or was getting facts wrong, or they were not doing their homework. And you said something about what the New Age was doing, how it was getting things. I think I must just mention to you that, the New Age is not there anymore now, as I understand the position. But after my appointment as Deputy Chief Justice, they asked for an interview with me, which I granted. And following that interview, they published an article in which in regard to which I had lots of complaints. This was raised with them, and it was indicated to them that a lot of things that they said in that article had simply not been part of the interview. And they were asked, they had indicated, the journalists who attended or had promised to send the article before it was published so that I could have a look at it. It was published without being sent to me for me to have a look at it first. And then when I saw it, I found that it had a lot of things that were never part of the interview. And this was pointed out to them. Fortunately, Mr. Nati Mube of the Office of the Chief Justice was present throughout the interview and had actually recorded everything.
Yeah.
So they refused to correct the article and apologize. And they were informed that what had been discussed at the interview had been recorded and that there was a record. So in the light of this, would they please correct it? I think at some stage there was an indication they would correct it, or they may have undertaken to, but ultimately they refused despite the fact that they were told that there was a recording.
Yeah.
And subsequently, I think something was sent to various media to indicate that there was something, there were a lot of things that were incorrect in the article published by the New Age about me arising out of that interview. So for what it's worth, I thought I must just mention that there is that incident that occurred between me and them.
Yeah. Well, first I must say I rest my case. Thank you, Chairperson, for that corroboration. But again, if you have people that, despite you showing them the real transcript of the report and they refuse to correct what they are saying, why should you believe them when they say New Age has got things wrong? So it means they are not trustworthy as people. I don't think...
In fact, what was quite very strange to me was the fact that they didn't show interest to say, can we listen to the recording?
Yeah.
One would have thought that they would say, oh, you have got a recording, let's listen to it because maybe we got certain things wrong by mistake. They didn't want to even listen to that, but they refused to withdraw and apologize and correct.
Yeah, that's correct. That's what was objected to, Chairperson. And then when we raise these things, then was seen as being unreasonable. For instance, on that one, as recent as now, Chairperson, you see, this one, the Star, they say Gupta assets up for sale and so on, and they put my face there and all that. Now, what is my face doing on Gupta assets? And the only reason they're doing this is deliberate, because they have already characterized Guptas as monsters and what have you. So now, because they want to deal with me, so in order to deal with me, they must mire me into this thing, so that I become sort of a proxy for all the things that the Gupta stand for. Then I must suffer all of that. This is the kind of South Africa we have. Very unfair.
Yes, no, I thought I must just mention that there was that experience for what it's worth. Yeah. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I'm not going to explore that issue further, but my understanding of self-regulation of the media in this country is that there are always channels available to lodge complaints where there has been factually inaccurate or unfair reporting. And there is always a code to which most of the major media houses subscribe to. There are inquiries constituted by the press ombudsman, whose decision would be subject to appeal by the appeals committee of the relevant self-regulator. And that explains why, in a democratic country, we all have to be men and women of the law. But where I was, Chair, is at page 234.
I can't interject, Chair.
Yes.
Can I just quickly interject to say that I know the things that he's talking about, but those things don't work as well as perhaps Mr. Maleka think they do. An example is what the Chair has just said. As an example, if you can't trust a judge to say here, who is anybody else, if you can't say a judge says, and the judge is using even positional authority, a judge is saying, here is a recording, at least listen to this and compare it with what you've written. Same thing, Chairperson, the front page of the Sunday Times would have a picture of some palace in Dubai, and they say it's President Zuma's house. And then the next time, that same palace has got a different owner, and they've never gone back to apologize to President Zuma that the palace that they said he owns is actually not true, and so on. But they carry on like this, and they get away with it because they've got the monopoly of the space. This is the challenge that we're facing.
Well, we have to get back to what is relevant, but it's difficult for me not to say this,
Yes.
that about 2 Sundays, maybe 3 Sundays back, one of the Sunday papers had an article relating to the leaks that have been happening, and on the front page, it said somebody was being fingered as the culprit for the leaks. And when you read the article, well, it said it was Mr. Nombembe. It interviewed certain people from which it got the information. And it seems that from when you read the article, it was the reason given why it was said it was Nombembe was that it was said he was close to Mr. Godan, Minister Godan, and that he wanted Mr. Godan to help him to get appointed as National Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, you would have expected that I think this was the Sunday Independent. Yes. You would have expected that the journalist would check, for example, what are the requirements for somebody to be the National Director of Public Prosecutions before writing that story. In terms of the relevant act, you must have a legal qualification. You must be able to practice as a lawyer in all the courts in this country. Mr. Nombembe doesn't have a legal qualification. And if I'm not mistaken, already by that time, there was a short list of people who were to be interviewed for the position of National Director of Public Prosecutions. So you ask yourself, what kind of journalism is that? People come and make an accusation against somebody. You have got to ask the question, why are you saying that? Why are you accusing him? What's the basis? And if they give you the basis as journalists, you expect that the journalist would examine the basis to see whether it makes sense. Somebody says an auditor wants to be head of the NPA, and the journalist doesn't say, but hang on, you need to be a lawyer to be head of the NPA. They don't say that. They just write the story. So, yeah, okay, all right. I think let's get that.
You know, Chairperson, that's where I was going to. You have indicated 2 critical instances of media reporting which was not factually accurate. But the point is this. Why would one newspaper lose government business because of that? And the rest of the media who are equally guilty on that assumption of factual inaccurate reporting don't go out of business. Perhaps Mr. Manyu would help us there.
Yeah. Chairperson, I think the reason I brought this list here so that people can see how much is spent. I want to challenge, let's say, this house, Tiso Blackstar. In year 20, I don't know how many millions are getting now, but in 2012-13, they got like 28 million. I want to challenge Tiso Blackstar to say government must not do business with them. Just 3 months, Chairperson. I guarantee you this place will shut down. Just 3 months, it will shut down. So what Mr. Maleka is saying, I don't think he understands the impact of the slice of government in anything. Even this house, which has got both business from government and elsewhere, but at least from GCRS. And in fact, that 28 million that they got in 28-12 as Tiso Blackstar is just the one part. There are rest of other government departments that do direct business with them. The figure could easily be 100 million. Let government not give them that amount. Just 3 months, Chairperson. I guarantee you this will shut down.
Mr. Manya, I think I do understand, and it's something that I'm going to converse with you at length tomorrow. Because on your...
I'm still here tomorrow.
Oh, are you not here tomorrow?
No, I thought we were going to finish today.
Chair, I'll be guided
Well, well, if he was never told about tomorrow, Mr. Manya is entitled to think we would finish today, depending. But let's go on and see how far we get.
Yes. Chair, I've not even started with the essential details that he has given this morning. I've not even gone to his statement. I'm just trying to understand the basic theory of his suggestion. That a mere critical reporting against the state means that you will fall down on your belly by losing government business. That I don't understand. And
Well, he is saying revenue from government advertising is so big in any newspaper, or at least it was very big in the Tiene, in the New Age, and he is making the example that even with is it Tiene, based on what he knows to be the position, how much they are getting from government, or at least how much they were getting from government at a certain stage. If they were not to get government advertising for 3 months, even they would collapse. That's what he is saying.
yes. And I want to test that, Chair, because we were at page 231 when we got diverted by all of these things. And we have now confirmed that the total advertisement spend from just GCRS alone for 2011 to 2012 was 194 million for all the media houses for that year, just from one government entity, and that is GCRS. On that approach, Mr. Manya gave some explanation about how that pie was divided amongst the various houses. What I wanted to test with him is what you had already put to him about the comparisons that he has made, that, for instance, SABC got the biggest pie. And if I may ask for your permission to test the answers that he has given in that regard. Because the suggestion that I'd like to make is that the comparison is not well-founded.
Yes, you may do that.
Okay. Mr. Manya, are you at page 231?
Just before that, Chair,
Yeah.
can I just briefly address just the intro that he had given, because I think that intro is incorrect.
Yes.
It's incorrect in that he says just the one entity. GCRS is not just the one entity, it's a conduit. When you say GCRS, you must see the entirety of government or best part of government.
Different departments bring
to
everything
GCRS. So you
GCRS.
can't have some kind of a preoccupation that 194 is government, is GCRS budget. GCRS has got almost zero budget. It's just a conduit. So all that money is money from different departments, as it was. So that must be very clear.
Thank you.
Can I put my questions now?
You may put your question.
Thank you. Mr. Manya, are you at page 231?
231.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You have indicated that at 24, for that year, got almost 18 million rand, correct?
18, yes.
We now know from what you told us that Ad 24 is owned by the Naspers group, and that group owns a number of newspaper publications, correct?
Yes.
They include, amongst others, City Press, correct?
Yes.
So that if you were to test what City Press got by way of government revenue from GCRS, you will not look at the total group owned by NASPES. You look at City Press itself for that year, correct?
No. I think the City Press probably constitutes upwards of 90% of this number. That's the publication that we're dealing with here. So all these other things like they would have, whatever magazines they have and so on, it's not the kind of publication that government was using. The main publication was City Press. So this, I'm almost sure, Chairperson, that about 90% plus was City Press.
Well, look at what the figures that you produce say about the total revenue earned by City Press from GCRS as a conduit for that year. If you look somewhere towards the bottom of the page and understand that the identification of the publications here is alphabetical, you will see that somewhere there is City Press reference. And my reading of what City Press earned by way of revenue for that year was 199,323 rand and 30 cents. These are the figures that you yourself produced, correct?
Yeah, those are GCRS figures.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malega, where are you getting the figure for City Press?
Chair, almost two-thirds down the page, you will see that there is
231.
No, what page 231, yes?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I see it. Yes, thank you.
And Chair, I'll take you through some of the newspapers under that table. But the point for now is that if you take City Press, which on Mr. Manye's evidence constitute almost 80 to 90% of the at 24 NASPES label, for that year alone, City Press received revenue of 199,000 odd rand. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that City Press has been in a long-established business of publication, at least by the year 2011 and 2012. We will look at the open source information so that we could tell the chairperson about its lineage up to 2011 and 2012. But for now, if you take the total art revenue earned by City Press for that financial year, was almost 200,000 rand. Compare that with what TNA earned for that year. And you will find that, Chair, at page 234.
Thank you.
The second last entry at page 234. Are you there?
Mm-hmm.
And we now know from your evidence that for that financial year, on a comparative level, TNA earned almost 8.7 million rand of government advertisement revenue from GCRS. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no?
Chairperson, there's a context to this.
Yeah, give the
I
context.
think pretty much like the chairperson was pointing out, I think Mr. Maleka is comparing apples to pears this way. City Press is a weekly publication, and the TNA was a daily publication, Monday to Friday. And TNA was not only a national newspaper, it's national and it also had provincial provincial publications on a daily basis, and so on. So to compare a day-to-day national newspaper with a weekender, 1 day in a week, is not a correct comparison.
Let me suggest to you immediately that that explanation, I will demonstrate shortly that it is mistaken. But for now, let's confirm the facts. On the facts as we have it, for that financial year, TNA has earned 20 times more than City Press from government's advertisement business.
Can I respond to that, Chair?
Yeah.
Now, I don't understand what Mr. Malega, where he's going, Chairperson, because that may be the case. What's wrong with that if what was, because even Ms. Williams, when she was here, she explained the Elma. Now, what happens if this kind of things that departments were looking for required the new age? This is what drives where we place newspapers. The GCRS is not some social development department that is seeking to spread things equally to a whole range of newspapers. No, it's not about that. So as to how much each newspaper eventually got is really neither here nor there. What is important is what were in the business plans, what was the campaign that the departments were putting up, and when you put those campaigns and the LSMs targeted into the Telma system, what did the Telma system point out?
No, I hear what you are saying, Mr. Manye, but I think what is happening is that you understood that evidence given by certain witnesses before this commission in relation to GCIS and revenue, which TNA got, you understood it in a certain way, which prompted you to get this information on this page as to what other people were getting. And and I think, rightly or wrongly, your first stance, as I understand it, was to say, look at what TNA was getting, look at what everyone was getting, before going into what the differences were. I think Mr. Malega is starting there to say the basis of your comparison was not right first, and then saying, let's take one paper and not look at the company, at the group, And then he says City Press. When you look at City Press, comparing it with the New Age, annual revenue for that period, the City Press got much less. And then in response, you make the point, and I think the point is a point that you were entitled to make, to say, well, maybe we have to look at even comparing the New Age with City Press, because the New Age was a daily newspaper Monday to Friday. The City Press is a weekend paper. So, but I'm just simply saying that's where this whole discussion started from. You understood evidence given by some witnesses to be projecting a certain image or a certain point. You sought to contradict that by using these figures. He is now saying, but the basis that you used is not right. That's where the whole thing is at the moment.
And I'm contesting that, Chairperson, because I think his approach is very mechanical in that he is looking at the size of the City Press, and the process is not that mechanical, it's a bit more scientific. The process is more like target marketing. Now, it may very well be, just like I said, Daily Sun will have the biggest circulation, but does it have the kind of market that we're looking for? Yes or no? So it's not as mechanical as the biggest gets the biggest, so to speak. The issue is, at that specific point in time, what was the campaign that was being run, what were the LSMs that were being targeted, and et cetera, and what did the system say I think the only discussion we should be having on this matter is whether, despite what the system said, we went and we put something different. That's the only credible discussion we can have on this. Otherwise, this is not going to take us anywhere, Chairperson, because the issue at hand is that GCRS is informed by Telma. So if Telma says the most appropriate and relevant newspaper for this kind of a campaign is the New Age, that is the most objective way that we can put into court.
Mr. Manye, I'm going to take you to Telma, and I'll show you that the New Age was not even assessed on the basis of Telma. And I'll show you that your attempt to run away from a comparison on a paper-by-paper basis by suggesting that City Press was a weekend newspaper and the New Age was a daily publication, and therefore the comparison in terms of revenue is inappropriate. That is not correct. Look at the other daily newspapers. You have told the chairperson, as I recall your evidence, and I hope that I got it correct, at page 231 about the Daily Sun. You remember that? Chair, if you go to page 231,
Yes, I'm there.
you will see that the fourth bottom entry relates to the Daily Sun. And my recollection of Mr. Manye's evidence was that that was a newspaper with the biggest daily circulation.
Yeah.
Look at what it earned from GCRS for that month. Can you confirm the figures for us, please?
It's right there.
Are you asking him to read it into the record?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, please read the figure into the record, Mr. Manye, for the Daily Sun.
8,778.
The biggest daily newspaper of wide circulation.
Again, Chairperson, if I may interrupt.
Yes.
Again, you see, Mr. Malek, it's almost like becoming like how journalists report stuff. He is now coming up with a soundbite, which is totally out of context. He now, I've explained that the psychographics of the Daily Sun, although it's got the big circulation, but people that would not, I've made an example of, it's not where you would put an analysis of a particular judgment, because the market does not do that. So therefore, and I've been at pains to explain that the actual numbers are meaningless. It's a mechanical process. The issue is target marketing. Who are you targeting? Where are these people that you are targeting? Which publication is very appropriate for who you are targeting? This is what counts in this place.
Well, Mr. Manye, you are entitled to add that kind of explanation to your answer, which you have done. It's legitimate for you to say, I hear what you are saying, but what about this A, B, C, D, as you have said?
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may conclude the daily-to-daily newspaper comparison by dealing with two additional daily publications, which
Yes.
you will get on page 234.
234, you said?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Fourth from the bottom is the Times. And Mr. Manye, I take it that you know that the Times is also a daily newspaper. Correct?
That is the?
The Times, if you look at page 234.
Yeah.
The answer is?
No, at the end of, you
Oh, he didn't hear the end of your question, just
Yes.
repeat it.
Oh, am I correct when I suggest to you that the Times is a daily publication?
was a daily publication, yes.
It was.
Shut down now.
Yes. At that point in time, you're
Yes.
correct. In 2011, 2012, it was a daily publication.
Yes.
And look at the amount of government advertisement revenue it received from GCRS. It is about 183,000 379 rand and 20 cents, correct?
Yeah, Chairperson, what's the right to it? We can do this the whole day. The answer is the same. That Mr. Malika has taken a mechanical approach, and I've been explaining that things are not as mechanical as you read them to be. I've explained that there's a bit more sophistication in deciding where the ad should go. There's something called target marketing and all that. It may very well be that Telma would have told the people otherwise, the ones that are placing the ads. So this is an outcome of largely what Telma does, but it's more than that, Chairperson. Not only does GCIS follow Telma, GCIS also has a transformation mandate. For instance, there are many of the publications that even on the programming of Telma, they won't feature. But GCIS as an organization with a strategy on media development and diversity had the duty and the responsibility to make sure that they support media other than over and above mainstream media. It supported everybody, including mainstream media. It cannot be that GCIS is expected to just support all others except those that don't have big names. Can't be.
Thank you.
You know, Chair, Mr. Manyi produced these figures in order to persuade you that in the broader scheme of things, TNA got about, 5-6% of the total ad spend from government in 2011-2012. When we try to examine that broad proposition on a granular basis with reference to his own figures, we are told that that is a technical exercise. The key question is, what's the point of producing these figures if you don't want us to examine them closely on a more accurate analytical basis?
No, you certainly are entitled to ask him questions, and he is certainly entitled to answer and to give an explanation if he has an explanation, because what you have done now is to look at daily publications.
Yes.
To say, okay, with regard to the City Press, you say it was a weekly newspaper. Let's look at other daily newspapers, like which other newspapers which were daily publications in the same way as the New Age was.
Yes.
That's where you are.
Yes.
He has given an answer in regard to the Times. He has given an answer in regard to, I think.
Chair, if you look at, and I'll be quick here, if you look at 3 columns above the Times, you'll see the Star. And you'll see the Star for that total 12 months period, and 97,000 rand.
And then the Citizen is not too far above that.
Yes, it's 247.
247.
You have the Herald, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
So on any comparative basis, and I'd like to put this conclusion to Mr. Manyi for him to comment if he wants to.
Yeah.
Yes.
These are newspapers which have been in business for quite some time. And all of them, and at least those that we have looked at, less than 200,000 rand per annum. And TNA, in its first year of business, earns more than 8.5 million. Correct? First year of business.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something about that?
Okay. Okay, yes, Chairperson, because I understand what is wrong about that, because usually when things are new, people embrace them. So TNA brought
People
freshness.
have, I'm sorry, I missed that. People
People embrace new things. So if TNA was new, people were having a first embracement of, wow, for a change. Now here's a publication that is different, that is not going to be riddled with all kinds of factual inaccuracies. I mean, even today, as I showed you with the Star, why did the Star have my picture on assets that I have nothing to do with, and so on? You know, so it just shows, Chairperson, the kind of media that we have. Now, if we have something fresh, must have been a welcome. And by the way, Chairperson, as I make this point, is that Gcrs can't take the blame for being briefed by government departments. What Mr. Maleka should be asking is, who are the government departments that did this? Because Gcrs, Chairperson, does not have its own budget. Let this be very clear. The only budget that Gcrs has, and I think Mr. Maseko explained this, is really just to pay for staff and all that. There is no, if there's anything, it'll probably at best be something that would get from environment if other departments did not spend and so on, and you're trying to make sure that money goes into good use. That's about the only time that Gcrs would do anything creative like advertising or something. But otherwise, Gcrs is a conveyor belt. It carries out mandates from different government departments. So you can't have a situation where Gcrs must now answer why did monitoring and evaluation, or why did public works, or why did anybody like that?
Yeah, no, that may be so, Mr. Mani, but the point, as I understand it, which Mr. Maleka is making to you and allowing you an opportunity to respond to, is this. He is saying, as the new age was entering the market, the first year, it comes in, there are established daily publication newspapers which had been there for a long time. He says, when you look at the revenue that it made from GCIS, accepting that GCIS gets money it's a conduit pipe, as you said, it's a conduit. Accepting that, he says, but look at the amount of revenue, the difference between what this newcomer was making compared to what established newspapers were making. He says it made in the first year more than 8 million rand, but newspapers such as the Star made in the same year 97,000 rand. The Citizen made 247,000 rand. I see the Herald above that made 255,000 rand. You can't deny, can you, that the difference is vast?
I think what Chairperson, the contention of Mr. Maleka fails to appreciate is
but
that...
let's start from this. Do you acknowledge that the difference is vast?
Yes, I acknowledge it.
You acknowledge that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, continue.
Yes, but I think it was justified. It's justified because I suspect that because government was generally frustrated by these factual inaccuracies, when a new player came, it was a relief that, oh, for the first time now, maybe things are going to be reported correctly and all that. So I think it was the freshness that was brought in that got people to say, hey, I think this is the place to go, and so on. So I think the important thing, Chairperson, on all of this is, was there value derived from this? You see, for me, that is the issue. And
that may be so, and I'm going to allow you to finish, so don't forget the point you wanted to make. I'll let you make the point. But if what you are saying, if I understand what you are saying correctly, I must conclude that what you are telling me is all these other newspapers were not doing their homework. Only the New Age was doing its homework. That's why it got such a lot of revenue from government, at least in the perception of government.
Chairperson, I don't want to speak.
Is that your approach? And I'm asking because yes. I need to make sure that I don't attribute to you something that you don't mean to say.
Chairperson, there's two issues. One is the TELMA. Two is the transformation agenda of government. Government is very serious, has always been very serious about transformation. So when, as I said, Chairperson, that government has even set up a whole subsidiary, MDDA, to try and make sure that alternative media is supported. There's a whole organization just to focus on this. It just shows how serious the issue is. Then you have a player that comes in line with that strategy. So government then would have looked warmly towards that. I mean, I've read out here the letter by Ms. Williams, 2013, when she was explaining this thing that government had to use all available platforms. All of these other platforms were also being used, but this one was used in line with what Telma was saying, coupled with the transformation agenda. If you look, Chairperson, I think at some point there are even targets that of the government spend. There was a deliberate strategy to say the 30% of spend should go towards community media. That is a deliberate strategy. So you would then, when you look at the analysis of that and you look at the media that has been spent, you'll find these kinds of what appears to be anomalies, when in fact it's the execution of the developmental agenda. If you do not do that, Chairperson, then you are paying lip service to the transformation agenda.
Chair, yes, I see it's past 4, but can I just make one point and, in fairness, ask Mr. Manyu to think through it because it's going to be important.
No, that's fine. Before we continue, can we agree whether we can stop at 4:30? Would that be fine with you, Mr. Manyu?
Easy, Chairperson.
Yeah. Would that be fine?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
You see, Mr. Manyu, you talk about government being dissatisfied and government welcoming a new player. But in fairness, this art spend is decided by GCRS through media buying, over which you exercised corporate control. Correct?
Chairperson, I need to qualify this answer. I was not personally involved in these things. There was a chief director doing. I was indeed in charge of the entire GCRS. All departments reported to me. It's not just media buying. All of them, they reported to me, including the one that was doing all kinds of irregular things. They all reported to me, Chairperson. But on a day-to-day, I was not personally involved. The chief director, Donald Poco, was the guy, and before him it was somebody else at the director level. But there are individuals that do this on a day-to-day basis as it were to implement the strategy. So it is incorrect to try and now make this a money thing. It's not a money thing. It's a government strategy being implemented by people best qualified to do it.
Chair, let me move on. Mr. Manyu, you earlier on indicated that the most objective vehicle to determine where government should place its business for media buying is the TELMA system. You recall that? My note says that you accredited Telma as the most objective tool to determine where government should place its advertising business. You remember that?
Yes, I said that, yeah.
And you know, don't you, that part of the Telma requirement is that a publication where government decides to place its business must have an accredited, audited readership and circulation figures, correct? You shake your head up and down. What does that mean?
Well, I thought it was an understood convention. It means yes.
Yes, but the point
I'm
is...
sorry, I didn't hear the whole answer.
No, Chairperson, he is saying I'm shaking my head. I had nodded, so I thought I was saying I thought nodding is a convention understood to mean yes.
Oh, okay. No,
but
no,
Chair,
that's
the
fine.
record does not capture nodding.
Yes, no, well, that has not been explained to Mr. Nyamani. When you nod or shake your head, that is not captured for purpose of the record. So I think Mr. Malega simply meant to say it's not enough if you just nod, you must say the answer. I think that's what he meant.
Yeah, I should have said so, Chairperson, but he didn't say that. He says that he says doesn't understand.
He didn't say that. Yeah. Okay.
We now agree that part of the Telma tool of evaluation requires that a publication which would receive government business must have accredited and audited readership and circulation figures. It is quite clear on what you've told us now, up to now, that TNA did not have those accredited readership and circulation figures. Correct?
No, incorrect. What is correct, Chairperson, is that TNA was using audited figures, but the difference is by who. It was not using the ABC figures, which the mainstream media was using. It was using auditors to audit the figures. That's what was happening.
So TNA chose to use a totally different model of auditing its own figures.
Correct.
When you, or Mr. Poco, assessed whether or not Gcrs should place its business with TNA, you're telling the chairperson that there will be audited figures from TNA.
Yeah, TNA was using audited figures. I'm not understanding the follow-up question because I did answer this question. I'm not understanding what is lacking with the answer.
Do you want to repeat your question, Mr. Maleka?
Remember, the analysis is done by Telma, which is a template, and the template will decide, all things being equal, which publication should enjoy government business. It's a template. Are we agreed on that?
Yes, I agreed on that.
And the template will show immediately on the spot which publication enjoys the audited, accredited circulation figures. Because newspapers would have submitted those figures, correct? It's on a template. You don't have to go and make an inquiry elsewhere. It is on a template.
Yeah, once again, Chairperson, I think, again, Mr. Malega is putting the mechanical hat. I keep saying that the ABC figures, the circulation figures, are just a cold number with no brain. Just a cold number, no thinking involved, just to say how many people and all that. Now, when you are doing placements, you got to use a bit of sophistication to take into account the kind of psychographics that we're also looking at, not just cold numbers. So Telma would do a bit of that, but you'd have to also use a bit of because we've got professionals there that are not going to just take everything and left it as is. You then need to put a bit of qualitative aspects as well that are informed by what it is that the particular department is saying is being targeted, the actual target group that is being targeted.
Would you agree that the one thing good with using just figures only, I think you call them cold figures, if you just use...
ABC.
Yes, if you use just how many newspapers are sold, what's the circulation, is that has got some objectivity about it, in the sense that it doesn't depend on anyone's opinion. You can prove or not prove what the readership is, and I must say that I don't know about some of these newspaper things, but if the moment you go to issues of the quality of maybe of the articles in a newspaper, then there's a certain level of subjectivity. But if you want to just compare, say, look, which one, if you just use figures, then that's very objective.
I don't agree, Chairperson.
Sorry?
I don't agree, Chairperson.
Yeah.
No.
Explain.
I don't agree because it's again the thing of being mechanical. The fact that you've got a particular circulation, which means you've got a particular purported number of people that lay their hands on that newspaper, does not address the purpose of why every person, a particular department wants to put an ad in a particular paper. The departments, they put ads not because they are bored. They put ads because they want to communicate a particular message to certain people, to say, we want this message to go to this target market, as it were.
No, I understand that. I understand that. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, to the extent that we may be dealing here, or we may be dealing with a situation where one is looking at why would more adverts from the same source go to that publication and not to that publication. To the extent that one is looking at that, if the position were that it was to be accepted that all we should look at is the circulation, the advantage of that would be that there is not much subjectivity. You just look at who has greater publication. But I'm not saying that other factors are not important.
Chairperson, let me just make this example.
Yeah.
I also have a car industry background. Now, I used to work for Toyota at one point. Now, they used to have one of their small cars at that time called Toyota Tez. Now, you can sell 100 Toyota Tez. 100, what will be paid to you for selling 100 Toyota Tez will be a minuscule of what will be paid to somebody selling a Rolls Royce. But both of you are selling cars. So therefore, to look at just purely how many Tezs I produce, when in fact somebody else is talking about a Rolls Royce, you are actually comparing incomparables.
Yes, no.
But they're all selling cars.
I think you and I are on the same level there, but there's some misunderstanding. I accept that there may be other factors that, other than the figures, that may be important. All I was simply saying is it not true that maybe some of the factors as to how important they are, what weight should be attached to them, might involve some subjectivity compared to things like simply the figures of circulation, without saying necessarily, without saying the figures should be the only factor.
Chair, if I may add on that score, I mean, we are a country of laws.
Hang on, Mr. Maleka. Let him respond.
Yeah, Chairperson, I think we're probably going to go around in circles.
Yeah, I think make your point and then we move on. Yeah.
Yes, okay. The point, Chairperson, is that if you then go and even interrogate actually how those numbers are arrived at, and then you would come to a very clear conclusion that even the reliability of these numbers that are so-called audited is another kettle of fish. Because even those numbers, it's not like it's gospel. There's no gospel even in those numbers, Chairperson. What people do, they take a whole bundle of newspapers, they go and give them to a company. And you go to any company, Chairperson, you will find bundles and bundles of newspapers left at the reception area. Nobody reads them, but those newspapers will be counted as part of the circulation, as it were. So how many eyes actually even get to them is another story. So even those numbers are actually cooked. So you can't sign your life on ABC numbers. That would be irresponsible.
Thank you. You may continue, Mr. Maleka. You wanted to say something and I stopped you.
Chair, we are a country of laws. And here the law requires that TELMA should be applied. It does not require that TELMA should be ignored. If someone has difficulty with TELMA, you go and apply for and obtain deviation.
You want to put that to Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Manyi?
Mr. Manyi, you accept that TELMA is part and parcel of the law that require lawful placing of government advert business?
No, there's no law that says so.
No, but you say TELMA is meaningless.
I beg your pardon?
Do you say TELMA is a meaningless process in deciding where government should place
No, but
business?
you said part and parcel of the law. There's no law. There's no law that says use TELMA.
But I thought
It is a tool, Chairperson, that we're using to try and make sure that the outcome is somewhat objective. If where Mr. Maleka is leaning towards was correct, it would mean that for all the community media that we have spent on, that is irregular expenditure, which is not the case. So you can don't need TELMA for everything. You need TELMA for certain and others. You don't have to use TELMA necessarily, but we use TELMA just to try to say to departments that what we do here is informed by some level of objectivity, as it were. But using or not using TELMA is not in the Treasury regulation.
Are you saying that you could ignore TELMA and go ahead and place government business with any publication?
The department's chairperson are doing that as we speak. In fact, GCRS is struggling. I don't know now, but I can even just show you that even now, newspapers, yes, they do that. Not news departments, they go directly. The 194 number, let's look at these years that I was involved. I think more than double that number, Chairperson, was placed directly outside GCRS. My biggest struggle was to get everybody to come into GCRS, and departments had their own relationships. They didn't have TELMA. They don't have TELMA even as we speak. But even with GCRS, even today, I'm sure that there could still be a few departments that have got direct relationships. So yeah, no, TELMA is not a regulated tool, no.
I'm not talking about other businesses. I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about other departments. I'm just talking about GCRS, because this is the entity which you and I are talking about with reference to your own figures.
GCRS is a government department. The same rules, there are no different rules for GCRS. We're all governed by the same rules. So if other government departments can place media directly without using GCRS and TELMA, and they are not red-carded, you can't red-card GCRS for not using TELMA. And as I say, Chairperson, with the community media in particular, Telma does not even feature. So and there is no irregularity there.
So you're basically saying that Telma is really not being used as, is not regarded as something binding
Yes, Chairperson, it's not binding. I mean, sometimes,
by GCIS or by other departments.
yes, Chairperson, I mean, you would tell the department that this is what the system says, but the department, some of these departments with relationships with media directly, they would insist, and GCIS did not have veto powers. This is another problem. GCIS does not have veto powers. If a DG from another department, it's his money. He says, you shall place this with Sunday Times. Even if I say, but Telma says, press it with City Press, and says, I said Sunday Times. So what you then do, because what we're all about is economies of scale, then you would look at how many other Sunday Times in the system and everything. So when you go to Sunday Times to bargain for a price, you then go there with a bigger number and you try and negotiate a price down. That's as far as you can do.
Chair, I see it's 4:30.
Okay, all right. How much time do you think you will need?
Chair, I'm hesitant to hazard a guess in the light of the answers that I'm getting, because there's not a straightforward answer. So I might well be misleading you in suggesting to you that this is the time I think I would be able to deal with. Yes.
Maybe we should start early tomorrow.
Yes, we are available, Chair.
Mr. Manyi, you may not have had an idea that we might have to go over to tomorrow. Are you able to come back tomorrow?
Yes, Chairperson, I'm here.
Yes, and we can start early, like 9 o'clock.
7 o'clock, I'm easy.
Even 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We are going to then adjourn, and tomorrow we will start at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.